So we're going to take a look at what do we mean when we say environmental science, and how is this a little different from other branches of science. So let's start off with this question. What is environmental science? Environmental science is the study of air, water, land surrounding an organism, or a community of organisms, which ranges from a small area to all the way up to Earth's entire biosphere. It includes a study of the impact of humans on the environment. It involves the physical and biological sciences. So it combines looking at not just the individual animal, but their place in that environment. Like, what job do they do? Do they produce food for another animal? Are they eaten by something? Do they consume something? Do they help break things down? But it also looks at how humans interact with those organisms as well. So we have to look at social sciences also, and that includes economics, a little bit of psychology, all kinds of stuff. So the major goals of environmental science are to understand and solve environmental problems by studying things like how do our actions change the environment, or how are we using natural resources? Because we are using natural resources regularly. And that's things like everything from relying on solar power to generate electricity, to relying on the ocean and water to transport goods and cargo. That's all part of using natural resources. So a lot of what people look at first when they look at environmental science is they'll first think about biology, and they'll think about specific branches of biology, and sometimes we even get it confused with ecology, which is the study of how organisms interact with their environment and each other. And that means how do they interact with each other, like predators and prey animals, things like that, but also what kind of environment do they need? How hot does it have to be? How cold does it have to be? And sometimes people confuse that with environmental science. But environmental science does include that kind of earth science, looking at meteorology, the study of weather patterns and things, or geology, the study of the earth and its physical chemical properties. We also have to look at physics, engineering, and technology, a little bit on chemistry, like biochemistry, the study of how different elements move through the ecosphere. But in addition to all of this, we have to look at the social sciences. And this is really what sets environmental science apart. It is the study of humans in there. So remember, ecology is the study of an environment and an ecosystem. Environmental science is the study of how that environment and ecosystem affects people. All right, how humans interact with that. Where do we cause damage, and where do we maybe, benefit? All right. So looking at our environment, we have to look at it through the lens of time. So we have to look at how things have changed over time. So wherever humans have gone, hunted, grown food, or settled, we've changed the environment. This goes all the way back to the very first humans. Over 200,000 years ago, the first humans, true humans, all right, were walking this planet. We started in Africa. We migrated across the entire planet. There were other hominid species, so there were other species of human-like beings. Neanderthal is one of them. But wherever we went, we were hunters and gatherers at first. We obtained food by collecting wild plants or hunting wild animals or even scavenging remains if times were tough. Right here in the Americas, you had Native Americans that lived as hunter-gatherers up through the 1800s and even a little bit later. And these groups, these tribes, would hunt buffalo. They would control prairie by setting fires to prevent the growth of trees, or that fire could even be used to chase herds of buffalo and confine them into one area to make them easier to hunt. So everywhere we've gone for our entire history, we have changed our environment to benefit us. It's one of the ways that we have managed to survive. So let's look at some of the animals that have been affected by this. So right here in North America, 12,000 years ago, we had a number of species roaming our continent, including giant sloths in the upper corner there. the mastodons and mammoths, which were elephant-like organisms, or the saber-toothed cats. You can see the skull of them there. But the thing is, a combination of both a changing climate. So the climate was warming. We were coming out of the deep ice age that we were in, to a warmer climate, but also the appearance of humans as hunter-gatherers probably contributed to the death of these organisms. There is direct evidence. We have found remains of these animals with arrow scars on them, literally bones that have been broken by spears and arrows made by early human settlers. We have found evidence of predation both ways in the saber-toothed cats. So saber-toothed tiger, Smilodon fatalis, yeah, one of the coolest scientific names there is, was hunted by humans, and it hunted humans as well. The mastodon, we have clear evidence across the globe that humans hunted mammoth and mastodon regularly. It was a big animal, and that's a lot of meat, and it could keep people going for a long time if they could take one down and then preserve those meats by turning it into basically jerky. So yeah, that is a way that we have been modifying our planet for over 12,000 years. All right, so when we moved past being hunter-gatherers, we started planting crops. All right, I'm willing to bet most of you guys don't have to go out and spear a buffalo or hunt a deer every day or regularly in order to make sure that you have food. You don't go out and collect wild, nuts and berries and things like that off the trees. Now, some people do that, but it's not how most of us get our food anymore. Most of us get food that's grown on farms through agriculture. So agriculture is defined as the raising of crops and livestock for food or for other products that are useful to humans. All right. So this is the act of raising food or other products that are useful to us, and that includes stuff like raising cattle for leather products. That's not just food; we use them for other things. And the practice of agriculture started in different parts of the world more than 10,000 years ago. All right, this is an old practice that's been around for a long time. The first places where regular agriculture was practiced, where you had permanent civilizations, permanent cities, were river beds and river valleys. So that's places like Egypt or Mesopotamia or the Indus River Valley. It all kind of started right about that same time of about 10,000 years ago. But we modified the environment there too. We had a dramatic impact on societies when we started farming. It is literally called the agricultural revolution as a result. It is where society started. When people stopped moving around, they started building things, building stuff like the pyramids, building large temple complexes, cities. In Mesopotamia, it was ziggurats. And we started doing other things like writing stuff down. So this is really where what we call civilization got started. During the agricultural revolution, we also changed the food that we eat. We started eating more vegetables. We started collecting seeds from plants and forming grains. We started taking those seeds and grinding them up, making flour and other products from that. The seeds that we planted, though, we picked the seeds that had good qualities that we liked. So if we grew a ear of corn that was particularly large or looked like it was extra sweet, or it came from a plant that produced extra sweet corn, what we would do is start taking the seeds from that plant and planting them and selecting for the traits that we wanted. Like how we breed dogs today to have dogs that are a certain size or have long hair or short hair, those kind of things. We started selecting for that, and it changed those plants from what they looked like in nature to what we recognize them as food for us today. We also started changing habitats as well. So in order to grow food, you have to have land to do that in. So that meant we had to clear grasslands. We had to cut down the grass and or burn it down in order to plow for fields. We had to cut down forests, or maybe we drained swamps or wetlands. We filled in wetlands and swamps with more dirt and leveled them off, and we started growing crops there. And we also replaced large forests with farmland on a huge scale. And what this did was it caused floods, water shortages, losses of soil. Because when you don't have plants in an area, their roots aren't there, and with no roots, nothing holds the soil in place. So when you have a rainstorm, it washes all that downhill. Or here in Arizona, because we don't have good root structure here, if you go out in the desert, scratch down just a little ways, you're going to find a layer of hard-packed clay down there. We don't have a thick topsoil where you could normally plant seeds because a lot of that's been blown away by wind erosion because we overgrazed and we removed the grassland that actually used to be here on the valley floor before large-scale ranching and things like that came through. We didn't stop at the agricultural revolution, though. The next big leap forward after setting up large scale farms, clearing huge amounts of land, building cities. We built big cities and we started farming. And we built empires on that. I mean, think the Roman Empire, think, the Egyptian Empire, these ancient civilizations. They were huge societies and civilizations that existed based off of farming, based off of controlling farmland. Well, then after that, we started exploring more parts of the world. We started colonizing more of the globe. You had the exploration of the Americas by Europe. And then we laid into what we know as the Industrial Revolution. So in the late 1700s, early 1800s, we start this process of the Industrial Revolution, and it moves from a shift of using animals or running water to perform work to using fossil fuels such as coal and oil. We start smelting more metals like steel and being able to create things faster and bigger. We had an increased efficiency of agricultural industries and transportation. Trains, cars, and other transportation move foods cheaply and greater distances. What this meant was that we were able to grow food in places like the Americas, package it up, put it on a ship, and send it over the seas to places like England. That was a big part of why England had the United States as a colony. And then after independence, we kept selling goods overseas to Europe. This industrial revolution was being kicked off at the same time that the American Revolution was. Just a little while after that, in the early 1800s, we were getting the foundations of the Industrial Revolution. Mid 1800s, we were getting the first steam engines, things like that. This eventually, though, did give rise to plastics and other synthetic materials. Eventually, cars and other forms of transportation are around. Now you guys can go out, you can go to the grocery store, and you can buy stuff from literally all over the planet made of materials that have never existed before. It's allowed for more people to survive, but it's also caused an increasing depletion of natural resources. This industrial revolution means that more people have access to better nutrition. More people have access to clean water. More people have access to medicines. So you have people not dying at age 12 from the flu. That's why we're shocked by what's going on right now with this current pandemic, is because we don't expect to die from something as simple as a respiratory infection. We think about things like, cancer, stuff like that. That happens when you're old. It doesn't happen when you're... But that's changed. I mean, and that's why it's a shock for us now. And it's because we've had almost 100 years of constantly improving health, 100 years of antibiotics and all these amazing things. But the problem is, this is all coming at the cost of natural resources. We are having to take more and more and more stuff out of the earth in order to make these things and to support this way of life. We're going to be looking at that very carefully. So what I want you guys to do is imagine a spaceship. All right. Imagine the Earth as a spaceship, that we are hurtling through space and we're not stopping anywhere, okay? We can't refuel. We can't pick up new materials. We can't take on, more copper to make more cell phones. We can't take on more food, really. We have to grow our food on our ship. And fundamentally, that's what Earth is. We are considered a closed system. What we have on Earth with us is what we've had pretty much since the start of our planet. The water that you may drink today Could be water that was in the body of a dinosaur 200 million years ago. It's the same water. It continues to exist. I know you guys have seen movies like The Lion King, The Great Circle of Life. When we die, our bodies become the grass, the animals eat the grass, and we eat the animals. So we're all made of this material that just has to be recycled by the earth over and over and over again. The only thing we do get is new energy. We get energy from our sun, all right? The sun itself has its own life cycle that it's going to go through. Eventually, it will run out of energy, but don't worry, that's not for another 5.5 billion years, all right? But we receive energy from space, and we also release some energy into space, mostly in the form of heat, okay? The problem is, even that balance can be thrown off. If we start adding more heat to our planet than what the planet is balanced to get from the sun, we can have some problems. And that's the issue. Problem is some resources are being overused. They're limited. There's only a certain amount of them available. We may produce waste also more quickly than the earth can recycle them. So one product of waste that we have is heat. Heat is actually a waste product. Some of the waste products we have trap heat, and that's that whole problem of a warming climate that you've probably heard about, climate change. That's that issue. Also, just straight up garbage. Plastics, they don't break down. They don't recycle easily. The earth cannot break them down and turn them into something else. So what we end up with is stuff that sticks around forever. Hundreds, maybe thousands of years. We're not sure how long some of these plastics will survive. So here's the takeaway message that I want you to get from this. Ultimately, environmental science is the study of Earth's natural systems and organisms, in addition to how we interact with those systems, we being humans in this case. Additionally, humans have changed their environment from the beginning to survive. Hunter-gatherers burned grassland and hunted animals. All right. Farming was then used to clear land. It introduced new plants and animals to the world by selectively breeding, by picking specific traits that we wanted from those plants and those animals. We have wild animals like water buffalo, but we don't have like wild cows as you would think of them. You don't see wild chickens necessarily. Those are things that we have selectively bred for our purposes. The Industrial Revolution then saw a rapid increase in consumption. So it brought in an era where the average person could consume a lot more goods, have access to a lot more resources. This in turn led to the human population going up because of better survival, but it also means that we have an increase in natural capital degradation. Basically, we do more damage to the environment as a result. Okay? And then finally, you have to think of Earth as a type of closed system. There's no such thing as a way. When you throw something out, that doesn't just poof, disappear. It doesn't cease to exist. It goes somewhere else on the Earth, and it stays there potentially for a long time. Maybe it gets broken down over years, decades, centuries. Think about it. We still find remnants of ancient civilizations. Pieces of pottery from the ancient Greeks from 3,000 years ago. That's trash that was thrown out 3,000 years ago, and we're finding it today. What are we leaving for the future? Because ultimately, there's no such thing as a way. We're all on this planet. We're all in the same spaceship together, and we have to be conscious of what we're doing, not just for our generation, but many generations into the future. All right, so that's where I'm going to leave things off today. I want you guys to keep some of these things in mind. We're going to continue to take a look at what do we talk about in terms of our consumption, of our use, of our resources, and we'll talk about how all of these things work and the functioning of the natural world. So we're just getting started, but this is the first round of things that I want you guys to look at. All right, take care, have a good day, and I'll see you next time.